Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. Now, I know that we have been talking about scaling your business a lot over the last couple of weeks, and I thought it would be a really great opportunity to bring somebody on who has done a fantastic job of doing exactly that, scaling their business. Kade Wilcox is the co-founder, because you originally founded it, but now you're a co-founder.
Yeah, well, we have lots of people.
You have lots of people of Primitive Social, and they have scaled from just $100,000 in revenue a year to $4 million in revenue in just 4 years. So I'm going to let Kade tell you the story about how he did it, but I know that you are going to love this one because we are all about growth this month here on the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. So welcome to the show, Kade.
Thank you. It's a real privilege to be with you today.
Now, I know that I got the founder thing mixed up because you originally started this business with your wife, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah, that's my co-founder. So we would have never been able to start this business 7 years ago if it wasn't for her. And then it gets a little tricky too because we would never been able to scale the business without my current co-owner, Jarrod Hurst. And so that's why I always say co-founder, because I don't want anyone to ever think that I'm the only reason why we've been able to make this thing successful.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about how you got your wife on board in the first place, because for a lot of business owners, the thought of working with their partner day in, day out, not having any break, not having any transition, not having any downtime, it makes a lot of people just shudder. So how did you manage to bring her into your business and also keep a happy life?
Yeah, good question. So we started our business out of necessity. So about 7 years ago, I took on a full-time job working at a church here in the city that we live in now. And when I took that job, I took a pretty significant pay cut. And so we initially started what has become Primitive Social out of necessity. We wanted to take that job, but needed to make a little bit more money. And so through all kinds of different things, we decided to start Primitive Social. My wife has always been a remarkable writer. I mean, even when she was a little kid, she was writing stories. In high school, she participated in UIL and won gold medals in writing. She's just always been a natural writer and had a real passion for it. So long story short, we decided to see if we could help businesses manage their Facebook page. This was 7 years ago. There was no business pages or public figure pages. There was no videos. There was no photos. There was no ads. I mean, it was really a different kind of platform. And so she loved the idea. So at the time, I had a full-time job. So it's not like we were working full-time together. I would kind of pick up the client, hand him to her, and then she did all the work. And we didn't have very many clients. And so it was pretty manageable with our young family. So that's kind of how we started it and how we decided to do it together. Now, 3-4 years in, when we decided to really turn it into a real business instead of a hobby.
Business.
Yeah. Well, for the first several years, it was really just for supplemental income. I had a full-time job. We had no real sales goals. We had no team. I would kind of organically pick up a customer here or there, and then Lacey would do all the work. And kind of funny story, the same friend of mine who had the original idea to manage businesses' Facebook pages, 3 years in, called what we were doing a hobby. And I'm really competitive, and it pissed me off. And so I said, no, wait a second. It's not a hobby. It's a real business. When I started reflecting on it, he was right. We didn't have any intentional sales goals. We had no team. We had no real organizational development in terms of systems and processes and onboarding and things like that. And that's when it got really exciting because we decided, you know what? We might have something here. What if we turned it into a real business? And the rest is history.
So at that point, were you doing the around 100K?
Yeah. So from 2011, when we started the business to the end of 2013, we were really doing far less than that. We were probably doing $30,000 to $50,000 in revenue. Now, the reason we were content is because that's what we set out to do is supplemental income. And what happened at the end of 2013, when we started realizing that we had an opportunity in front of us to maybe make a run at this and turn it into what we call a real business, we started setting some sales goals. And so I've never built a business before. I'd never run a business. I'd never been a salesperson or anything of the sort. And so I did what I only knew how to do, and I got a yellow legal pad, and I said, in 2014, we want to make $100,000 in revenue. 2015, we want to make $250,000 in revenue. In 2016, we're going to make 500,000. So I used real simple numbers and felt kind of crazy doing it because we had never even come close to making $100,000 in our lives. And yeah, I mean, what's fun is in 2014, we made 98,000 in revenue. So we almost met our goal. In 2015, when we wanted to make 250, we made $460,000. Wow. And then the third year, when we had wanted to make $500,000, we made 1.3 million. So, you know, awesome. We were able to really meet and exceed our goals. So it was a lot of fun.
Okay. I have a lot of questions. Let me just write a couple down so I don't forget.
Okay.
So the first one I have is, did you just pull those numbers out of your butt? Like,
no. Well, yeah. When I made him in 2013, oh, absolutely. I had no idea what I was doing. You know, it's like when I started thinking about like, what are we going to do to actually turn this into a real business? I had no concept of what a real business was or wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so as I was reflecting on it, there are two, I remember vividly, like it was yesterday, thinking three things. And it turned out, I think, to be somewhat right, but I just got lucky. I thought, okay, well, what is a business? And there are three things that came to my mind, even though I didn't know what I was talking about. Sales, a team, and then like an operation, like, you know, or an organization to deliver the products or services or, you know, whatever you're doing. And so what I chose to focus on first, because I didn't feel like I could have an organization, I didn't feel like I could have a team without money, is I chose to focus on sales. So then I asked the question, well, you know, how do you develop sales goals? And I'm like, I got no clue. So I'm just going to pick numbers. And they felt really audacious. They almost felt impossible, which is how I operate. It's like set these really crazy goals that almost feel silly. And I'm really competitive and motivated. And so that worked for us. So we just got lucky. And yes, I just pulled them out of my rear, as you put it.
So what were you doing before you moved? I've got a few questions about how you did the transition, but what were you doing? You said you took a job with the church.
Yeah, I was an executive pastor at a church. Right. And prior to, you know, going on staff at the church, I was the executive director of a kids camp. And so that's really when those two jobs in that season that I had those two jobs, what was really impactful is the roles that I had at each of those organizations were very entrepreneurial. So no one handed me a job description and said, do A, B, and C. It was more like, here's what we're trying to accomplish. You know, we're not totally clear on how to do that. So go figure it out. And that turned out to be exactly how I thrive and you know, what I've since discovered as being, you know, how I succeed. And so I give both of those organizations a lot of credit to helping me identify kind of my entrepreneurial spirit and some of the characteristics about me that make me decent at, you know, running a business and particularly sales. And it had not been for them saying, hey, you know, here's where we're kind of trying to go. You go figure out how to get us there. I'd never be doing what we're doing now. And so for that, I'm eternally grateful.
So that's called intrapreneurial. And I've always had jobs, there's actually a name for it. I've always had jobs that have been exactly, well, not when I was younger, but as I moved up the ladder, I always ended up in these jobs that were almost created for me because I could see, this is my superpower, is I can always see the problem and the next step.
Right.
I could always see what we needed to do to grow a business. And I worked for government. So this is really hard to try and tell the government what they need to do.
That's a whole other podcast, isn't it?
It is. And then there would just be these jobs that got created and I'd have these obscure titles that usually reflected nothing on what I was doing because I had to fit into the corporate box. But then it was just, can you fix this?
Yes. Yeah. You're very intuitive.
So, all right. Tell me about at the point at which you brought your other co-founder, co-owner into the business. Let's just start there and then I have another question for you.
Sure. So what happened the end of 2013, basically we started working two full-time jobs. So I kept my day job and at the same time we started pursuing developing out this business the best way we knew how. And we got really lucky. So in early 2014, I started doing CrossFit and so some backstory. From 2011 to the end of 2013, anytime we had a customer who needed a website or had a website need, we had to outsource it to a freelancer. And it got to the point where it was, to be honest with you, a very miserable experience because I would sell the project or be the face of the project, but I had no control over the project whatsoever. And you probably have done that enough to know that it can be very difficult kind of saving face with your customers because you don't want to make a bunch of excuses because that makes you look bad. at the same time, you don't want to pump out terrible work because that makes you look bad too. So it just got to the point where we couldn't really care for customers very effectively. So I'm doing CrossFit, and this other guy's doing CrossFit who I'd never met. And I overhear him one day at the garage talking about building a website for this company. And so I went up to him, introduced myself, and said, hey, I overheard you talking about websites. Do you build websites? He said, yes. I told him what I just told you and said, do you want to do a project together? And he said, absolutely. So we did a project together, and he hates this, but it was like love at first sight for me. I mean, he was like prompt, he was hardworking, he did exactly what he said he was going to do. Our pricing was comparable, so I felt like he was fair. He also had a full-time job working for his family's business, so this was something he was passionate about, not something that he had to do, and so I felt really good about that. So for the first year, we did that. I picked up a project, I gave it to him, we did it kind of together, and we did that for a while. Then we got to a phase where he just kind of white-gloved as Primitive Social, so we did all of our projects together as a Primitive Social, but we were still separate. And then this really cool thing happened. I had a business coach, and he asked this really great question about our partnership, Jarrod's and I's. And he said, are you all better together or apart? And we both just unequivocally felt like we were better together than apart. And that's when we decided to officially become business partners. So we own the company 50-50 together. We actually own other companies together now 50-50. And it's been a really, really good partnership. And happened at a time where we were really turning on the gas, so to speak, into growing and building our company, and been really instrumental in, I think, at least one part of our success.
Okay, so the question a lot of people here are going to be asking, and they're going, Sal, please ask him, is how did you negotiate the minefield that can be a partnership? Tell me a little bit about the conversation you had on who was going to do what, how much it was going to cost each of you, all that kind of stuff. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I know everybody here is listening who has ever thought of having a partner wants to know how you managed it.
Well, I've heard all the horror stories that your audience have, so I totally get the question and understand it entirely, and had the same concerns. Both of us did. I think for us, what ended up, first of all, that question was really, I thought, profound. Are we better together or apart? So when you start running through the long list of alternatives, apart or together, and you start weighing those things, that was a really influential, aspect to us making the decision. Some other things that we really worked through and processed was our really specific skill sets. So he's our CTO. He is a software developer. He is a phenomenal computer programmer. And I'm like the furthest thing from that. Like, I don't know a single line of code. So our real core competencies and skill sets are very different. So what he is very, very good at, I don't know the foggiest thing about. And what I am very, very good about, he knows about, but he can't do and doesn't want to do. So our primary skill sets really complement each other in that way. So we're very different in that sense. But here's the thing that I always speak into because I've gotten these partnership questions a lot, and it is this: we're enough alike that we really get each other. So we're different enough that we can kind of run in our own lanes and contribute value in very different and unique ways. So we're not running over each other, crisscrossing paths all the time. But at the same time, we're both so much alike that we share the same vision and the same values and are passionate about the same things and are committed to the business in the same way. And that's what really makes it work. And so it's that we're both very different, but we have enough commonality and similarities and passions that, we're not constantly pulling away from each other because I'm trying to go to the right and he's trying to go to the left.
So how did you negotiate the money side of things when he was essentially, even though he had his little side hustle business, you'd essentially grown this business to something decent and he was coming into something you'd already established, but yet you still became 50-50. So how did that work?
It's an awesome question. So we both gave a little. That's what you do. And just like any partnership, whether it's marriage or business partnership or whatever, to the degree that you're willing to give and take and to meet each other in the middle, a lot of times is going to be where you find success. And so what we did is, look, I could have never given up my business name and ownership and all that. And so I really admired him that he was willing to shut down what he was doing and had been doing for a long time and come join forces with us under our name and our leadership and things like that, right? I really admired that. And that wasn't a monetary thing, but in many respects, it was more than money. I mean, to me, that was a really big deal for him to do that. And so consequently, I felt like, so that's what he gave. And so I felt like we had to give too. So we made more money as a business, so to speak, at that point than he was making. And so that's what I gave. So he gave up, I feel like, the pride of shutting down his own thing and joining forces with us. And we gave by agreeing to an equity share that was non-monetary. So like he didn't have to pay any money for it. We just came up with a business split. And originally it was 60-40. And he felt good with that, and we felt good with that. And, that was another key. I didn't force him into like feeling like he was getting the raw end of the deal, and the same thing for us. And it wasn't until about, I don't know, not that long ago where my wife and I just felt like this is crazy. Like we're not 60% of this business, and like we couldn't do this without him, and he couldn't do this without us. We should be equal partners. And so we actually just made the decision, like, this is crazy. We make all of our decisions 50-50, which was another really key thing. We agreed from day one, we are not our percentages. Whatever those percentages are, we're not our percentages. We are going to do this together. And, it's not going to be like Kade owns 60% and you own 40%. That's never going to be in the conversation. And so that's how we did it. I don't know that that's the best way to do it. I don't know that's the way everyone should do it. But I think it has contributed to our health because both of us have demonstrated to the other that we're willing to give and take, not just take. And I think that's really critical.
Yeah, I think when you go into it very organically, like you said, it can be quite easy to just negotiate these things without having a burden placed on you. And like you said, Jarrod almost gave up his identity, his own business identity, to come and join you. So it's really lovely to hear a nice story about how it's really working. So thank you for sharing that. Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of scaling, you said that you thought that sales was the first thing you needed to focus on. So is that, do you think, the first step that people have to take?
Wow. I mean, as you know, and as your audience knows, there's a lot of variables from business to business. But if we're primarily talking about really small businesses like we were at the time, wanting to grow, I think that is something that has to be strongly considered. And here's my one caveat. We chose to grow our business without any outside money or without, borrowing a bunch of money to invest into an organization before it had sales. So just to clarify something, the reason I felt so strongly about sales is because us making money to invest in people and operations was the only way we were willing at the time to grow our company. In other words, I didn't want to go to a bank and borrow $100,000 and invest in operations and people before I actually had sales. And so we chose for sales to drive our growth. And so if that's where your audience and where a small business owner finds themselves, then yes, I think that really focusing on a sales strategy and someone who's going to really own sales is a really good, kind of first step and kind of a good first thing to focus on. I would change my answer if someone says, hey, I got really lucky. My dad's a multimillionaire, and he said he would invest $250,000 in my company for no equity and interest-free for 5 years. My answer might be a little different.
Yeah, but for the people listening, I think you're on the right path. So what do you feel like the next step that you took in your business is, because you're still growing, what do you think that next step is in order for you to grow?
I love that question. There were two things that we were trying to do simultaneously. So when I say next step, I don't mean in terms of like, secondary importance.
No.
I think it's equally important. We got lucky, and I can't say that we intentionally did this. Because my wife was so good at her work and what she was doing, and she was so good at working with customers, what we were able to do simultaneously was I was able to grow the company, but she was able to really adequately and effectively and exceed expectations for our customers. And so I think the other thing related to sales, this next thing that you asked, I think it's really being obsessed about making your customers happy. Because, you can be the best salesperson in the world and be generating a lot of new revenue and new customers, but if you're not taking care of the ones that you have, then you're not really growing or scaling anything. You're just replacing. Customers are going out the door, customers are coming in, but your revenue and your growth is not going anywhere. And so I think that has to be something that you have to simultaneously focus on while you're focusing on sales, is not losing sight of your existing customers.
Yeah. And I think as people who start off as independent business owners generally have that desire to over deliver, and sometimes to our own, detriment.
You're right. Yep, that's right. And I don't think that's a bad thing early on. Now, I do think there's a really critical time during your kind of your growth where you have to get a grip on that, where you have to really figure out the impact it's making on your business and the consequences it's going to have downstream. But I think for someone I don't regret at all for the first, several, I would even almost say 3 to 3.5 years of our business where we were not being compensated remotely close to what we were providing in terms of services, deliverables, value. But I don't know that I would change it, honestly, because it really allowed us to perfect our craft. It allowed us to develop credibility in our city, with our customers. It allowed us to create a bunch of happy customers, which translated into referrals and then helping us grow our business. And so you do have to get a grip on it. You can't do that forever because then it'll bury you. But I do think early on, it's a really good kind of posture or, kind of mentality to have.
Yeah. It's one of the exercises we do inside the course is just really analyzing how much over delivering there is and how much it can be costing you. And I think because we're talking about products, lots of retailers want to add, they feel like they have to give extra to someone who's bought something from them. It's like, thank you for buying, please take some more. And that amount, all those little bits actually add up. And that's money that's literally coming out of your pocket. So I think you're right. Over delivering in some ways can be great, but it all harks back to the first part that you were talking about, which is you're in business to make money. So you have to be driving the sales.
Right. And I think you raised a really great point. I mean, I would really differentiate between service and product. So if you're selling products, you don't want to be giving away, if someone pays you $10 and you're giving away $20 worth of product, that's bad.
That's bad.
That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm really talking about service, which is more, a time value and not like an actual product or monetary value. And so I think you raised a really good point and would be very careful for someone in retail, to overdo it, because that has a real tangible consequence on your bottom line and your inventory and all those kinds of things.
Yep. Okay. So we've covered sales and we've covered this concept of I guess moving to the next level. So once you had established that set of boundaries, which part did you bring Jarrod in along this timeline?
Yeah, he would have been very much at the, I kind of look at our business having 2 life cycles, okay? Like the first 3 years when we were just kind of unintentional and just kind of took on whatever came to us organically. And then, the end of 2013 and really the beginning of 2014 to 2018 is kind of life cycle 2 or phase 2. And if you look at phase 2, Jarrod came in, right at the beginning of that. And we were very, very much focused on sales. And that's kind of when he came into the deal, which was great because I went crazy selling websites and he was able to build said websites, right? So that's the time frame he entered the picture.
Okay. So how, apart from his obvious technical abilities, how do you think he helped the business grow? Because you already had those technical abilities by outsourcing to him. So what other things did he bring to the table that enabled you to get to this $4 million mark in 4 years?
Yeah, the first thing he brought was dependability. So if we said we would do something for a customer, we did it, and that gave us a lot more credibility, which helped us sell more of our services because of credibility. Versus when we were outsourcing it, things took a lot longer. We weren't able to do a lot of things we said we would do because we couldn't control it, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing he did is he created dependability. The second thing that comes to my mind in terms of his specific contribution to growth was just having someone, to kind of run the race with. Someone to collaborate with, someone to bounce. My wife's never wanted to be a business person, right? Like that's not what she does or what she wants to do or what she's passionate about. And so I was on that front, I was kind of on an island. And so when Jarrod came into the picture, now all of a sudden I had someone who had worked in his family's multi-million, it's a huge company. He had worked there for 15 years. And so we were able to talk about where we wanted to be and why we wanted to be there, how we were going to get there. And even though I was doing a lot of that implementation or the sales with leading the company, his, wisdom and contribution to those conversations were invaluable. So that's the main thing he was able to contribute to our growth on that front.
Yeah, it's amazing how different that can make life. I just brought my friend who was my competition at one point. I've just brought her into my business, and
Cool.
I flew her up for the weekend, and we got the whiteboard out, and just having somebody there to interact with for a day and a half, I was so amazed at how we basically trajectorized the whole business for the next 18 months. And it was just the concept of just having somebody in real time. And I think it does seem to make a difference if they're actually with you rather than remote. The energy just seems to change. That
Definitely.
I think all of a sudden you realize these things are actually possible.
Right. Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, I think you nailed it. And I'm glad that you have that, in your business as well. I think it's a main game changer. I mean, and what's interesting, one of the other things that's really contributed to our ability to scale the company is building out a leadership team. So when we hit somewhere between 1.5 million and 2 million, well, really it was around 1.3 million. We realized that we were woefully underserved, underdeveloped. Our team, our customers were woefully underserved and developed as it related to a senior level leadership team. There was Jarrod and I, and then there was everybody else. And there was this huge leadership void in the middle and at the top, because Jarrod builds products. I sell things. I'm not great at management. Jarrod's not great at management. And so there were a lot of things that, our team was suffering, our customers were beginning to suffer because we didn't have a leadership team. And it really speaks to some of the value that you just referenced in, bringing in a partner. And we feel the same way about our COO. And now we have a chief of staff, and we finally have a CFO. And so one thing that, took us from 1.5 to what we've been able to do this year, and what will take us from 4 million to 10 million over the next couple of years, is now we have this really, really good leadership team built out, and they're really smart, and they're smarter than I am. They're smarter than Jarrod is. It's been a major game changer over the last 6 to 9 months, and will be a major game changer in 2019 and 2020 as we try to reach our, next kind of big milestone of $10 million. So I think that's another really critical thing for people to recognize as they kind of chart out their path forward, is at what point do you think you're going to have the capacity to bring in people who are smarter than you and better than you at doing certain things that are very critical to your business?
So my question to was, I 100% agree. I'm sitting here nodding. So my question to you was, did you find it hard to kind of not relinquish control, but was there any pride that got in the way of, we're bringing somebody in to do like the CEO's job? I know you've got a COO, but that general manager position, that big bird's eye view person, was there any point did you think that should be me?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm a control freak, so it was definitely difficult. But, one of the interesting things, for example, for me, at least in my own personal experience, going from 20 employees to now over 55, is you have to relearn, what your company needs from you at each given, phase along the growth path. And so it took me a bit to realize okay, what my company needs out of me today at 55 plus employees is very, very, very different than at 20. And you have to be self-aware enough and humble enough and, all those things to realize that you have to shift gears and relinquish, as you put it, some of that responsibility and at times control. And then find, it's not that you have to completely abandon those areas, but you have to reimagine, what you need to contribute to, hiring or operations, while at the same time allowing someone better than you and smarter than you to run wild and free and let them own it and be as good as what you hired them to be. Right. And so, yes, it was very difficult. But the more you kind of are in tune with your own strengths, I think the more it is, the more it frees you up to allow someone else to operate out of their strengths. And then you just contribute to their leadership and your organization to the degree that they need you to, versus what you think you should be doing because you're a control freak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it so makes sense, because I interviewed Neil Patel a few weeks ago, and I said to him basically, what part of the business do you do? Because he was talking about the different people he has in his business. And he said, well, I basically write the content. I'm obviously dumbing this down really quickly, but
Sure.
I write the content. It's what I'm good at. It's what I like doing. And I said, oh, would you have any say in the people who were hired? He said, well, I kind of have a say, but I don't really have anything to do with it because it's not my thing. We have a person who's awesome at that. And I guess at the time I was a little bit taken aback because I would have thought that being so analytical, he would have been not necessarily a control freak, but he would have wanted his hands in all the pies. Right. So when he said that, I was like, oh, right. And he's like, I've got a dude who does this, I've got a dude who does that, and my co-founder does this, and they all do it really well, and I do my thing.
Yeah, it's powerful, isn't it?
It is. It's
hard to do. I mean, it's easier to listen to someone else talk about it than doing it in your own business.
I think you do have to would you agree that you have to get to that internal role of CEO at some point before you actually bring somebody on? Like, you have to understand how your business is running and all the moving parts so that you know who you need to hire to bring on board.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair statement. And, the reason it's so difficult, a lot of times it's not black and white, right? I mean, you have to really understand the right timing, both. I mean, there's so many variables, like, can your customer handle a change? Can your current team handle changes? Can you handle changes from a financial perspective? I mean, one of the reasons it took us so stinking long to hire a CFO and a chief of staff is we just didn't have the resources to allocate to the kind of talent that we wanted in that position. Yeah. And so sometimes you have to be patient. You have to do the best you can with the resources you have. So I think that's what makes it so difficult for most organizations, is really balancing the need for something and yet, your business's readiness for that thing from a financial and timing standpoint. So it's a lot easier to talk about, once you've done it than it is when you're in the middle of it. And, I empathize with people because I've been there. And quite frankly, just recently, like, our COO has only been with us for 15 months. Our chief of staff and CFO have both been here less than 3 months. So Like, we're just right in the thick of all this,
Yep. So you're still growing, and you are 100% right. One of the things I always get asked is, when do you know it's the right time to hire? And my answer is usually 6 months before you even ask yourself that question.
Yeah.
Because you're asking yourself that question because you are at the point where you're at your own full bandwidth. You're at capacity. You're probably over capacity. So I feel very proud that I've brought this new person on board before I'm at that point. Like, I think I could see it just over the horizon. So like you said, it's really scary. You've got to pay, you've got to pay their wages. You've got to make sure that you are able to train them. You've got to allocate the time and the resources and the money. And so this is where I think, as a business owner, lots of people freak out because it's not just you anymore. Even if it's your first employee, it's like, crap, now I'm responsible for somebody else.
Yes. That's right. Yeah, it's a whole nother level of risk and emotional energy, and adds, tangible responsibilities to your already full plate. Yeah, I think you're spot on.
All right. So what do you think is the next step for you guys? Like, you guys have done a lot. You've got 55 staff. You've now got 5 in the management teams. You've brought 3 people on plus you and Jarrod. Mm-hmm. So, and then is your wife, she just writes the content. She's happy to stay in that role.
Yeah.
Yep. So where's the next bit? Like, what are you looking at when you're analyzing your business now, thinking, well, we've got the money, we've built the team, we've built the operation, we've got the procedures in place. What does that growth accelerator phase look like to you?
Yeah, I love that question because we've been thinking a lot about it. So I actually have a lot of clarity, at least for today, on that answer.
I was going to say, we'll preface this with, I didn't ask you the questions beforehand. We're just making it up as we go along.
Really good. No, it's perfect. I really like it that way. So the first thing I would say is, we have been like a rocket ship the last, 4 years. And one thing that we haven't focused a lot on is profitability. So we make money. For a small business, we make a lot of money, but having a lot of revenue doesn't necessarily mean a lot of profit. And so one thing we've learned over the last year to 18 months is that profitability is really, really, really important. Not just because you're working your brains out and you want to benefit from all the work that you're doing. That's an obvious reason why profitability matters. the other reason profitability matters is because you know, at least as what we're learning, that unless you are profitable, you can't really be proactive about your growth. You almost have to be reactive because you don't have a lot of like financial freedom to be proactive. So the next phase of our growth, number one, is really, really focusing on profitability. We really believe and have identified for our company that getting to a place of 20% profitability would allow us to do some things for our employees, for our culture, for our existing customers that would really enhance the quality of our business, the quality of life for our team and our customers, and position us with a much healthier foundation to grow. So that's priority number one. Priority number two, and very much connected to priority number one, is sales. We cannot, kind of rest in what we've accomplished in the past, because it's not good enough. Like our past success will not automatically make us successful in the future. So we have to stay urgent and hungry and passionate about continuing to sell. So that's priority number two. Priority number three is really investing in our team, in our expertise, in the right kind of talent for where we're at. One of the hardest things about the last couple of years of our growth, because of its speed, is that we have hired a bunch of wrong people. We've been wrong for them, and in some cases they've been wrong for us. And so we want to really go deeper there in investing in our people and the recruiting process and the preparation process, and make sure that our team is good for the kind of customers we're bringing on, and that the customers that we're bringing on are good for our team. So those are the three things. We want to invest in we want to focus on profitability. We want to continue to invest in and focus on sales. And then three, we want to really invest in our team, both the existing team we have, but also in our recruiting and in our onboarding and the whole people and culture part of what we're doing. So that's how we think we're going to go kind of next level in this next year to 24 months, as we try to go to the next
10
level.
million.
Yeah, I hope so. That's the goal. 10 million in 10 years, which would be 2021. So
that's awesome. Awesome. It sounds like you've got a solid foundation for it. So we haven't really talked about digital marketing, which is what you run. You run a digital marketing agency. But I think there are probably some people here who are thinking, I would like to work with the kind of agency that is reliable and it is reputable and does care about their people. So if people listening would like to know more about Primitive Social and what you guys do, where can they find you?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, first of all. Then go to our website, which would be the absolute best place to go. It's just primitivesocial.com. And we have worked really hard to create a tremendous amount of free content that adds value. And so for that small business owner or that DIY marketer that doesn't have the resources to outsource it and really wants to figure it out on their own, I really believe they could go to our website and absorb all that content and be very well established in serving their small business well as they develop their own content strategy. And so, just go to primitivesocial.com. And there's a tremendous amount of resources there that I think would really help out your audience.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing this journey, because it's interesting to hear how it's played out for you, and also how it's kind of how your mindset, I guess, has changed from getting to that 100K to 4 million, because so many people that I talk to, it seems like it's almost impossible. But you didn't do this with a whole bunch of VC. You didn't do it with the rich uncle. You just literally did it on, the bare bones. And what you did was you realized when you had to bring extra resources in order to grow. So congratulations for being really mindful about growing your business.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You've been a great host.